So with that, we know we only have a limited time with Representative McCollum or Candidate McCollum in these circle conversations. There is no agenda. This is really meant to be a conversation in the style of the CSJ community of just having honest and frank conversations. There is no plan, or we just want to take advantage of the time together and to have a conversation with Representative McCollum. And I'll just start with the first question. Representative McCollum, especially for those on the call who might not know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're deciding to continue to run for Congress, given everything going on in Washington right now?
That's a great question. Besides coronavirus, people aren't being very nice to each other or working together, which are not the values that you learn at St. Catherine's or that I learned at home. So for those of you who, some of you know me well, some of you are hearing me for the first time. I grew up in South St. Paul at a time at a very scandalous mixed marriage. My mother was Lutheran, my father was Catholic. And my mother always kept her faith tradition. My father kept his, but my mother was the one who taught me my father's faith tradition so I could do communion and confirmation and that. So I grew up in a household that early on, I learned that people would make judgments and make decisions on the value of someone based on their faith, even in South St. Paul, even in the 1960s. And I grew up in a house where I was taught that you don't do that, that you judge a person by their actions, their words, their deeds. And if there's a person who's struggling in those areas, are they trying to improve themselves? Are they trying to be a better, kinder person? And so when I went back to college, I went back as an adult. I took a break for a while because no one could find teaching jobs. And I thought I was getting knee deep in student loan debt and I didn't want to get in over my ears. I took a break, raised my two children, and then came back to St. Kate's, a non-traditional student during a traditional day program. And it was absolutely fabulous. And it made me realize how important intergenerational relationships are, the relationships I had with some of the retired sisters who I would see walking around the campus and contributing, as well as the instructors and the younger students I served with. And I think, part of making a decision is having lots of different voices heard. So that can be faith, that can be life experience based on age, it can be, race, it can be so many things that we need to, when we're making a decision that's going to affect a lot of people's lives. I've always tried to put together kitchen tables in which I could have conversations with people to see how those decisions were going to affect them. So I'm still running because I still get goosebumps when I walk into the Capitol at night and I see the dome lit. And I think this little girl from South St. Paul has a voting card that's equal to every other person from all around the country. And so as long as I can continue to be excited about doing the work, I'll continue to do it. I'm going to keep focusing on, I have a DC presence and a Minnesota presence, but they're interconnected. The healthcare legislation that I vote on is the same healthcare legislation we do casework on when people are having problems with Medicare, Social Security. The education policies that I vote on in Washington, DC are going to be implemented by the students, the teachers, the colleges, the faculty, the social workers, and everybody that comes in interaction with those students. So I always, when I'm working on something, I realize the two values that I talked about. One is interconnected with everything. And it's going to touch everybody in a different way. And two, because of that, I need to reach out as many people as possible. And really, as one of my instructors said at St. Kate's, and I won't mention which one, zip it up and open it up. Zip up this and open up the ears. So with that, I'd love to hear what's on people's minds, because if I go through, what's important to me, everything's important to me. But I want to hear what's important to you, because this is my opportunity to listen. Thank you.
Okay, Karen.
Okay, thank you. Again, my name is Karen Zelsnak, and I do have a question and a concern for you regarding the COVID-19 vaccine. And I know this is a big area, so I wrote down some comments, so I would try and be concise. So I'm concerned about presidential candidate Joe Biden's position, and I'm assuming that it's also the position of the Democratic Party on COVID-19, which includes support for a mandatory vaccine, whereas President Trump has stated he is not in favor of a mandatory vaccine. I know that vaccine development is still underway, but even when we have a vaccine, it will still be a somewhat an experimental drug. And it's been reported that 50% of the population has said that they will not take the COVID vaccine. And many of these folks are highly educated and they are reading about and watching this issue very carefully. They are starting to cite the Nuremberg Code, in particular, the first point, which states the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential, which means that people should be able to refuse a vaccine. And I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but there is also a well-funded effort called Health Freedom, working to convince people to vote on the Republican side of this single issue of a mandatory vaccine. There are people who are Democrats that are now switching to vote Republican over this issue. And my concern is that the Democratic Party's position on COVID-19, which includes language about a mandatory vaccine, will alienate hundreds of thousands of voters across the country. And I'd like to know your position on this, and also if you have heard about Health Freedom and its efforts. Thank you.
Well, with all due respect, there is not anything in the Democratic Party platform, nor in Mr. Biden's candidacy platform that anybody will be forced to take a vaccine. That's just not true.
He has publicly stated that.
He is not. I disagree with you. We're working very hard to make sure that a vaccine is available. It won't be available for the entire population. And I'm very concerned to the point that you made. A lot of people aren't going to have a lot of trust in it because of the political interference that the Trump administration put into the Food and Drug Administration and some of the other comments that he's made. So, and the vaccine, we don't know how effective it's going to be for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if it's going to be more than one dose. We don't know really anything about the vaccine at all right now. We don't know if there'll be one ready in 6 months from now. We don't know if there'll be one ready from a year now, or what kind of efficacy it'll have. So none of us are out there saying anything's a mandatory vaccines. I work on vaccinations for polio and a lot of other things all around the world with Rotary clubs. And we try to convince parents in India and in Bangladesh that a polio vaccine would be life-changing for their child. But we don't force anybody to do that. I know Mr. Biden from working on international affairs that his words, I'm afraid, are being twisted and slightly taken out of context. I don't doubt that you have read that. I don't doubt that there's a quote out there saying that, but no one is going to force anyone to take a vaccine that they don't want to take. And that is from the bottom of my heart, just because it's such an emotional decision what you inject to your body. So thank you for raising that. We do know that there's a movement out there, but it's misrepresented as to what the intents are. Thank you.
I would like to see the Democrats speaking out more loudly about this issue then, in terms of not supporting a mandatory vaccine. I'm really concerned just about the word getting out. And thank you for your response. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you brought it up. We know it's out there, but there's so many other things that we're trying to talk about: the economy, everything that kids are losing in education, and just trying to get the basics out on how to be safe with COVID's a struggle, as you know. But thank you for raising that. I really appreciate it.
Another question?
Betty, I'm looking at your mailer I'm not sure if it was the last one or not, but when you talk about the fifth crisis, the threat to our democracy by President Trump and Republicans trying to undermine the U.S. Postal Service and our democratic right to mail in ballots. And then under your picture, it says, Betty stands with the men and women of the U.S. Postal Service. How are you able to influence or be a part of trying to make it much more safe for the mail-in and for our elections to be accurate?
Well, Elections are something I had the privilege of working on when I was in the Minnesota State House, when Joan Grow was Secretary of State. And so elections shouldn't be political. Elections should be something that every American has confidence in, that when they go to vote, their vote will be counted, whether it's an absentee vote or a vote in person. And what we had slowly seen, and there's documents on it, and we started holding some accountability hearings with the U.S. Postal Service in Congress. But of course, the administration quite often wouldn't either answer questions or attend. We started hearing from postal workers themselves and people dependent upon delivery over the past several months, over the past 6 months, how their medication was no longer coming on time, how packages from people who work in the post offices, mail sorters were being, perfectly good mail sorters that worked, were being taken out and literally put outside. There's photographs of them to rust away and to be destroyed by the elements. You know, all that was slowing down the mail. Part of it is President Trump and some of the Republicans would like to see the U.S. Postal Service disappear and everything go private. But even Amazon, UPS, FedEx, they all come and testify that the U.S. Postal Service is the last line. They're the last line of getting that package to someone's door, that they don't go everywhere, every place. They even use the U.S. Postal Service. And so as we started hearing the president make his comments about, you can't count, absentee ballots, you can't trust people who do them, states that have been mailing out absentee ballots, Colorado, some of the Northwest states have been doing it for a long time. We've got a municipality that's actually a very rural part of Minnesota that's gone absentee for years, that's been on NPR, starting to bring into question the integrity of those elections, judges, and those votes. Undermines the confidence in our electoral system, which as a person, when I was in Tunisia, when they were voting on their constitution, I was there with Republicans and Democrats from Congress, both staff and elected members. And we sat there together in a nonpartisan way, just telling them how to set up an election system, how to set up a rules, and how to have confidence in it. Never realizing that some of the, and I'm going to say it, dirty tricks that were going on to undermine some of the elections I've witnessed in countries that are trying to merge into democracies happening here at home. And I'm very concerned when you start bringing into question the efficacy of the election on the election night. It's a real problem. Minnesota will have counted its absentee ballots by and large election night, except for those that haven't come in. Some states don't even open up the ballots until the next day or the day of the election. And so there's going to be a lot of ballots that are going to be counted, and no one's vote should not count because they chose to vote absentee, maybe for a health reason, maybe for COVID, maybe for a physical reason, or maybe just for convenience because of what's going on in their family life.
I guess we know our mail carrier very well here at Carondelet Village, and he was sharing that right in front of their eyes, 7 of the machines were removed and crushed. And you could just tell as he told the story how he was feeling about what that was doing to their potential for work. And so
right.
I'm also concerned about our postal workers and their dedication to wanting to make certain that every single ballot, every single mail goes through. And so it's hard.
If they see a ballot, they're treating it like it's better than first class mail. The postal workers here, we have great postal workers. Part of the problem with the postal office, and I'll just take another second because you'll hear about how it doesn't make any money, it's underfunded. So the day someone starts working at the post office, they assume that individual is going to retire from the post office, and the post office has to take that full retirement for that individual on day one and set it aside. So they're never going to have any profit. They're never going to get ahead. No one else in the world does that. But that's what's happened to the U.S. Postal Service. And that's why on paper, they don't look like they're very successful.
I'm wondering if we can encourage one of the students to share what are some burning issues for students on campus right now, or what are things you're passionate about?
I can share something. So I was mentioning I'm a social work student. I'm also studying public health, and I'm completing my social work hours at St. Mary's Health Clinic. And I can't tell you how many families I'm working with right now to get Wi-Fi or to help them pay bills for distance learning. So I don't know if there's any current funding for this, but everywhere I'm calling, it basically seems like there's no funds.
Well, if they're in the St. Paul School District, call my office and my district director will get you in touch with the right people. We don't do local politics, but sometimes we can be the first call for help to get you the right number. So, that's available on the internet, but it's 651-224-9191. So the CARES package, the first package that Congress passed that President Trump did sign, had some money in it for education. But even when we were putting that package together, we were hopeful that maybe kids would be able to go back to school this fall. But then we learned that COVID's aerosol transmission, we learned more and more about the asymptomatic folks, right? And so as our knowledge evolved on this virus, we realized when we put the HEROES package together that we needed to do more and more for education. What we have to do educationally, I think, and my major at St. Kate's was in education, is we need to call this the educational year of COVID. We need to say that kids have been learning. They've been learning how to live in a pandemic. They've been learning a lot of other things. And they've also experienced a lot of things that if we can turn it around, we can make them stronger for it. But if we don't help them, it will make them more disjointed. It's going to cause mental health issues and behavioral issues and educational gaps. And so we have an opportunity as a nation. We need to stand together, united on this, and support all students, pre-K and college and graduate students. Everyone's been impacted by this, and we can't afford not to be there for them and to acknowledge the disruption this has caused in their lives. You bring up, people talk about broadband all the time. And I say to my rural legislators, I'm with you on the broadband. I want to get it out, especially out to Indian country for Indian school children, for telehealth. But we also have broadband deserts, just like we have food deserts here in the urban areas. Will you help me with that? And so we're building bridges to also recognize that just because you live in a city doesn't mean you have access to broadband.
Mm-hmm. And just to share too, I work with clients anywhere from like Ramsey County, Dakota County, Hennepin County. It's a wide variety. And over again, I'm finding difficulty finding resources for these people with distance learning. So, yeah. And even, and I'll just take another second that even if you can get it there, we need to figure out, and with some of these parents that have a very, very busy life, right? Some of them aren't, maybe they can work a smartphone, but as far as getting onto a Zoom meeting or helping out with homework or figuring out how to get to that extra connection that might be on the Smithsonian's website to make history, natural history more exciting for their kid. We need to work with the parents and educate them on how to do this and find the time to do it. And there's a huge gap in that not happening, even for parents who feel comfortable around computers. Thank you. Good luck. You're our future.
Another question?
I'd like to know, do you know where Biden stands on the Palestinian cause? I asked the question because at a townhouse meeting, somebody asked him the question, something like, has Trump done anything good? And it seemed like his response was, yes, when he changed the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So it's like, basically, where does Biden stand with the Palestinian cause? Do you have any idea?
Well, that's something I hope to have an in-depth conversation with him. As you know, I've been working on the issue for a long time because I believe, the rights I fight for Native Americans, rights I fight for Palestinians. When I go to a refugee camp in Bangladesh and meet with a Rohingya, or when I'm in the Congo DRC, where women have been brutally used as objects of war, those are my rights too. If I don't stand up for their rights, their right to be free, their right to be free from torture, self-determination, I'm not standing up for my rights either. And so I look forward to having a conversation with him in more depth. I know that he, under the Obama administration, was a big supporter of a two-state solution. And under the current administration in Israel with the annexation, and by the way, that's not off the table. Bibi made that really clear. I should call him the prime minister, excuse me, but he made that very, very clear through some of his allies who spoke out after they started doing these one-off recognition agreements with some of the Arab nations. And I really think that the Trump administration, and quite frankly, Israel, I work with a lot of Israelis who want self-determination for Palestinians. So I want to be careful how I phrase this, because I work with a lot of magnificent, wonderful human rights people in Israel on these issues. But it really kind of sounds like it's a way to start isolating the Palestinians. And I'm going to be speaking, I just got asked to speak at a UN conference on this too. So I will be having conversations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Betty, as we're coming to the end of our time with you, there are many issues going on in Washington right now, whether it's immigrant and refugee issues, the current processing changes for asylum seekers, to Native American missing and murdered women. All of these issues are so important to the sisters and the community here. What's your hope, not knowing the outcome of the elections, but what's your hope if you're reelected, and what do you hope for in the next Congress?
I wake up every day optimistic that people can, put their differences aside enough to listen to one another, to find common ground. There's nothing wrong with that. When you find common ground, you gain ground. You're not giving ground up. And we have to stop looking at these issues in such polar ways. So I've had a lot of success. My chairmanship in the Interior Appropriations Committee, my ranking member, David Joyce, a Republican from Ohio, we get up together and we say we work on nonpartisan solutions. We don't even call them bipartisan solutions when it comes to Native American healthcare, education, women, the Indigenous women being murdered. I try to do that with a lot of my social justice work that I do internationally. But we need to come together to do that for the homeless here, for those who are food deprived here, for, as the young student from St. Kate's pointed out, those who don't have access to education, which we know is an opportunity to open up so many doors. And we need to stop concentrating on our differences and focus on what unites us. And so my values of kindness, and which I work on every day, my values of getting the facts and speaking to the truth and the science, and being a straight shooter. I talked to a woman from Connecticut, one of my congressional sisters, who's African American, and on her Zoom calls, people have been breaking in and using the N-word and saying very hateful things. She wrote a powerful, we'll share that with you. She wrote a powerful op-ed, and I was moved reading it. And I said, I know discrimination as a woman. I've had hateful things said to me as a Catholic. I've had things, just said to me, because I'm a Democrat. But to have on top of that, the racial slurs and everything else, it just broke my heart. And the highest honor I think any of us can get in Congress is being told you're a workhorse and you're a straight shooter. And at the end of the conversation, she said she really appreciated the phone call because she knew it was sincere and heartfelt. So I'm going to keep going to work, and I'm going to be sincere and heartfelt, but I'm going to be tough standing up for the values we all share and the values I learned at St. Kate's. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you.
Well, Representative McCollum, we know you have a busy schedule and you've given us a half hour of your time today. We're just very, very grateful. Any closing words, especially for anyone who hasn't voted yet? Why should they vote for Betty this term and get out and vote in general?
Well, the most important thing is you should vote. I think my Republican mother would be voting for me, and I think she'd be voting for Mr. Biden this year too. But the most important thing is to vote. Men and women have given up their lives to do that. And we need to stand up and be a bright beacon in democracy. And that means a lot of people turning out to vote. But then we need to have confidence in the vote. If you haven't voted yet, you can still vote in person early, and it won't be as crowded. My congressional website, if you want to go there officially, or my political website, both has information with the Secretary of State's office how to do that in Ramsey and Washington County. If you're in one of the other counties, we can link you to it. Wear a mask, bring some hand sanitizer if you're going in person. It's too late to apply for an absentee ballot. You can still vote on the day of the election. I know some people like the ceremony of doing that, but your voice won't be heard unless your ballot's in the mail. And with what's just happened with the census, your vote's even more important because we know a lot of people weren't counted in the census. So stand up, vote, and help others have their voice be heard for that were missed in the census.
And I just want to say, this is Linda Napier, one more thing about Florence Steichen is here. She wasn't able to get on the Zoom, but I told her I'd let people know that she's watching. And thank you for your comments on the Israel-Palestine situation.
Well, Florence knows where to find me if I ever stray from that.
You bet.
That you know.
I won't. I'm all the way in, but I know Florence reminds me I have to stay in. Thank you all for all you do for peace and justice. I love all of you. My prayers and blessings. Be safe, be healthy.
Thank you again,
Thank
Representative
you, and the
McCollum.
same to you.
Bye-bye.
I know.
And for any of the students, if you need any help finding out how to vote, minnesotavote.org. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marty.
Thank you, Marty and Joan.
Right, and Joan.
Yes.
This is mostly Marty.